take a look at the Space Command website, and you take a look at the plans they have, it's mind-boggling. I mean, they are trying to put in motion plans which, in effect, could allow some command post in Colorado Springs, you know, in Colorado mountains, to instantaneously attack any part of the world without warning from space platforms with either nuclear or other high destructive weapons, and to chance, they think, to cut back on forward basing and simply to hold the whole world in thrall to instant destruction with, you know, Mach 10 hypersonic drones giving instant surveillance of whether somebody's crossing a street in some Australia or something like that.
Well, we now know that the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s was actually the first space war ever. With U.S. satellite supremacy, we were able to pre-identify all of Saddam Hussein's military targets before the war ever began. And in the first 2 to 3 days of that war, we bombed over 90% of Saddam Hussein's targets, intentionally leaving just a tiny sliver of capability in place that we then played cat and mouse with over the remaining weeks of the war, where we used 100 cruise missiles at $1 million apiece, tested out new stealth bombers and new laser weapons. And so coming out of that war, the Space Command said, my God, whoever controls space is going to control the Earth below. Whoever controls the space will win all the wars on the Earth. And so we now know that the Kosovo War, the war with Yugoslavia, was actually the second space war. And the war with Afghanistan was the third space war. And in that war with Afghanistan, the United States introduced a whole new weapon system called the UAV, the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, a pilotless plane that flies over Afghanistan, sending back what is called real-time, split-second time streaming video via satellite back to MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, where General Tommy Franks was sitting watching the television screen. Is it Taliban? Is it Al-Qaeda? Is it a wedding? And in a moment, he could push the button and the UAV, the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, which the Pentagon has nicknamed the Predator, could fire in real time, could fire and hit the target on the Earth below. All done in split second by satellite technology. And so the Pentagon calls this increasing the kill chain. And in George Bush's new war with Iraq, the latest space war, the Pentagon has tested out a whole new military doctrine called shock and awe. So today, with the United States controlling space, we are able to absolutely win every war on the Earth below. There is no challenger on this Earth able to stand against us. At the same time, the Bush administration is introducing this program called National Missile Defense. The idea of having a bullet hit a bullet in deep space in order to protect the continental United States from attack by the so-called rogue states. Well, I would submit to you that this idea of national missile defense is really a Trojan horse, that it has nothing to do at all with defense, but in fact it's about controlling space, dominating space, and denying other countries access to space so that the United States can be the master of space and the master of the Earth below, that we can control the battlefields of the Earth.
And it's not beyond realization. I mean, the U.S. is, there's nobody else, there's no space race. The U.S. is in it alone. You know, no other country is willing to put the huge amount of money into efforts to dominate by extreme violence at the cost of lots of low social costs, as you know.
The American people are being asked to turn over the national treasury to the Pentagon because so-called missile defense will literally cost us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. And how will we pay for this? Through cuts in education, health care, job programs, environmental cleanup. This is the way the Bush administration and their allies, their corporate allies, their aerospace allies, who view space as a new market. This is how they intend to pay for these programs. But besides this idea of national missile defense, that they say will protect us from attack by the rogue states, and from even China, who today only has 20 nuclear missiles capable of hitting the United States. Besides national missile defense, though, there's a whole new program underway, and it's called theater missile defense, TMD. And the idea of theater missile defense is you don't wait until the missiles get way up into deep space. You forward deploy your systems and surround this so-called offending rogue state and try to hit their missiles immediately after they're launched in what's known as its boost phase. And so today the United States is moving to deploy theater missile defense in the Middle East and in the Asian Pacific region. We're going to put theater missile defense on Navy ships, Aegis destroyers that are made at Bath Iron Works in the state of Maine. And on these Aegis destroyers, they will be outfitted with interceptor missiles that will be deployed throughout the Asian Pacific region. In addition to the Aegis destroyers, the United States will also deploy theater missile defense on trucks, ground-based launchers, and also on the airborne laser, a converted Boeing 747 with a laser beam on its nose, flying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, over this so-called offending area. Now, when I started thinking about this, China has 20 nuclear missiles capable of hitting the United States. If you've been to Walmart or Kmart anytime recently, you know we're China's very best customer. Is China going to attack its best customer, knowing that we have 7,500 of our own nuclear weapons that we could hit them back with? It just doesn't make sense. But then I found an article in the Washington Post a while back called "For the Pentagon, Asia Moving to the Forefront." And the article says that we are going to manage China. The United States is going to manage China. The article says that we're going to double our military presence in the Asian Pacific region. In fact, we're now lengthening and widening the runways on Guam and Wake Island in the Pacific to handle the B-2 bombers. And also, we're now pre-positioning cruise missiles on Guam. And we're going to deploy theater missile defense systems in Japan, what we now call our unsinkable aircraft carrier, where today we have 40,000 U.S. troops deployed. And right next door to Japan, in South Korea, where we have 40,000 U.S. troops deployed, and where Bush is now heating up tensions between the United States and North Korea, we're going to deploy theater missile defense in South Korea, which will only anger the North Korean government even more, making them feel like we are closing in on them and that they must respond by escalating their own military hardware. We're going to deploy theater missile defense 90 miles off the coast of mainland China in Taiwan, which will make China feel like they've got to respond and they've got to go now and build more nuclear missiles to meet this growing threat. You know, after 9/11, I began to look at this whole map of this Asian Pacific region a lot differently. Previously, I was just looking at the coastal region along China's coast, where the United States is talking about deploying these theater missile defense systems. But after 9/11, I now look at China's inland border, an area that we now call Central Asia. We know a lot more about it today. We know that the United States has set up bases now in this Central Asian region. And that, as President Bush has said, we're going to be there a long, long time.